Hi, my name is David Grant Sinclair, and I am in the Urban Leadership Master's Program through the UNLV College of Urban Affairs. And today we'll be talking about the Las Vegas economic recovery and my hypothesis, which is that the recovery is not exactly going the way other people think it is, especially in regards to poverty. So I've pulled some data, and I'd like to share my information with you today, what I found out. And the data sets that I pulled, 3 of them were from my researcher. And I pulled a data set about population in Clark County, and then also personal income rates in Las Vegas, and average weekly wage in Las Vegas as well, and how that has changed from the years 2002 to 2016. I also pulled some other data sets along the way. I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and got some information on inflation during that same time period. And also through cms.gov, I had information that I was able to pull about personal expenditure on healthcare expenses. And I was able to crunch all that information to give you some nice visuals so that we can actually look at things while we talk. So let's go ahead and start looking at things now. So here's some things I found out. Number one, the population increase and the wages increase have a strong correlation together. In fact, they came out to be 0.993 in correlation. So there's a strong relationship there between the population growth and the growth in wages. Also, the increase in wages went pretty well with the increase with inflation during this time period as well. So what we're looking at here is the first set of data that I looked at, which is actually 3 different data sets from my researcher. The blue line represents the population growth in Clark County from 2002 to 2016, and the orange line represents the average weekly wages by quarter for Clark County between 2002 to 2016, and the green line represents personal income in Las Vegas for the same time period. And the first thing you can see, and the first thing I found out numerically, is that there's a strong correlation between the increase in population and the increase of average weekly wages. I also found out that average weekly wages increased over this time period in general about at a 2.2% rate from year to year. And during this time period, inflation pretty much averaged its rise about 1.9% per year. So we can see that the average weekly wages were going up in pretty good sync with inflation. Although inflation did have some rocky time period during the downturn, it's basically stabled out at about a 1.9 to a 2.2 rate. One thing that was very interesting when I looked at this, though, was thinking, well, it looks like the economy is doing very well if we just look at wages and we look at population and we look at inflation. But when we look at that green line, personal income, you will see that it really tanks, and it tanks during the downturn. The difference is its recovery never reaches the same levels it was at by 2002, where with wages, they actually have exceeded where they started. In fact, when this goes off the graph with wages, we see that wages are actually now at peak levels that they've never been at before since we started recording this. So my question when I pulled this data was, what's going on here? Why is personal income tanking while wages are going up? So to help me understand why personal income tanked and why weekly wages went up, I decided to do a thought experiment. Since I'm dealing with averages, decided to look at what an average yearly income would look like and what some of the breakdown would be for a single male in his 40s living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Las Vegas. And so on this chart, you can see some of the data that I have here, some of the places where I pulled it from. So this person at the end of 2016, with the last, for this data set that I looked at for the last weekly wage, if that was his wage he had all year round, he would be making about just under 45,500 a year. And then I decided to look at some big ticket items that you have to take out, things like taxes and rent, health, auto. Because with health too, I assume that perhaps this person is part of the gig economy, like they're driving an Uber or a Lyft, and just trying to see what are the expenses this person would be expected to pay for this particular type of person, and also being single. And as you can see, with these big ticket items being taken out, they have just under $1,900 per month to be able to spend on consumable things like gas and groceries. And this doesn't include things that may happen like maintenance, to the car. He gets into a car wreck, or perhaps, he has extra bills and co-pays because something happens, he sees a doctor. So for this particular person being quote unquote average, they can do all right. But anything that happens to them catastrophically, they're going to be in some trouble because they only have about $1,900 a month to spend on things if something really bad happens, like they get very sick and they have to go to the hospital, there's an extended stay. So this person could be comfortable if everything is okay. So we have to imagine, if we're dealing with average incomes here, what about someone who is making less? This person that we're looking at here is only making just under $22 an hour. What about someone who's only making 15? What about someone who's only making 12? So on the flip side, what about someone who's trying to raise a family with this amount of money? Or perhaps there's two people and they're both only making 15. What would that look like? And so I think we start to see that there's the potential here that there's a shaky foundation to this economic growth that we're seeing in Las Vegas. And so doing that thought experiment led me to start thinking about income inequality. So how is it with the population increasing and wages increasing that personal income is going down? Well, it could be that the population is increasing with people who are earning lower wages, and there's just a lot of them. So it dilutes the number of people at the top. So I thought about the problem of income inequality. Like, is there a relationship here? And as we all know from all the other graphs and everything we've seen, we know that there is the top 10% and the top 1%, and then the top 1% of the 1% of Americans hold the vast majority of the wealth, and that there tends to be a more flat distribution of wealth amongst earners below the top 10%. And in this next chart, we will see that our state, Nevada, actually is ranked number 4th for being the 4th worst state for income inequality, where the top people in our state earn on average 37 times more than the average income earner. So that information gave me some confidence in the fact that my hypothesis might be correct. I'm not claiming that it is correct, but I really think that this is a bit of evidence that really supports my hypothesis. And so it made me think, well, what is the next step then? So we're already looking at this. What are some areas in which that these people who are probably near the bottom are going to be very vulnerable? So down the rabbit hole I went, and I decided to go back to looking at healthcare and average weekly wages to find out what is the relationship between the increase there, because there might be a relationship worth exploring, to look at what economic growth means for people who don't make as much as the top 10 or top 1 or top 0.1% in our state. And so at cms.gov, I was able to get some information about the expenditures for personal health care. It was in the billions. And so I decided to take that information and just look at rates of increase from one year to the next and compare it to the rate of increase in wages from one year to the next. And what we've found is that the rate of increase for healthcare expenditures nationally is about 3% greater every year than the rate of increase in wages in Las Vegas annually. So you can see that healthcare is already outpacing wages. But when I took a look at the long term, when I looked at the years from 2002 to 2016, over that 15-year rate of increase, we can see that healthcare costs were outpacing wages during that time period by 24%. And that healthcare costs during that time period increased by 52% from 2002 to 2016. So I think it looks like wages are not keeping up with something that we would think is a mandatory, what used to be mandatory with the ACA until just recently, mandatory cost. And so it begs the question, if someone's put in a position where they have other things that come up, like that guy before, he wrecks his car. Where's he going to get his money from to fix his car? Maybe he doesn't buy health insurance for that year. And during the time that he doesn't have health insurance, something happens and he has to go to the emergency room. And depending upon the cost of that and where we live and how many people find themselves in that particular situation, it means that rates go up for those of us who have health insurance, who have to pay for it. And it creates this feedback loop or this cycle. Anyway, I thought this was some very compelling data about what happens to people who find themselves in these situations and if the economy really is keeping up with the increase in cost. And this is just one indicator to look at. And finally, I came across an article, and this article was very insightful, and it was about the growing poverty rates in Las Vegas. That not only is Las Vegas one of the fastest growing cities in the United States of America, but it's also one of the fastest growing cities in terms of its concentration of poverty. What I found fascinating about this article is this image here, which shows how poverty increased in Las Vegas from basically from 2010 all the way to 2016, and that this increase in poverty happened not just during the recession, but during the recovery after the recession. So that as people were moving in to Las Vegas, we had more people in more neighborhoods becoming more poor. So I think, again, as a piece of evidence towards my hypothesis, is the economy improving? Yes, but is it improving the way we think it is for everyone? I would say probably not. And if we compare this map to this map, which is from Opportunity Atlas, which is a website where you can look at neighborhood demographics, and the purpose of this website is to basically give probabilities or outcomes for children who come from certain neighborhoods. What is the likelihood that they will go on to college or they will be incarcerated? What is a probability of what their annual income would be based after the data that they have pulled and put together? And if we were to compare the Opportunity Atlas map to the poverty rates map that we were just looking at, we would see that they would almost fit over each other perfectly. And so this begs the question, is the economy improving in such a way that it's pulling people up out of poverty because maybe they're just poor people moving to Las Vegas and they are in the process of working themselves up through generations? Or is it trapping people in poverty by zip code? Because that's the thing that we can start looking at and tracking now. So for this, I would have to say that I believe I have some strong evidence to support my hypothesis. I think it would take a lot more research to prove, but I think it also poses more interesting questions at this point, which is, who are the people that are receiving the higher end of these wage increases? What are they doing? And what's happening with the people who did recover with their personal income? And why is it these neighborhoods specifically that have grown over the past 10 years to become poverty neighborhoods, and what can we do to better serve them. And thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you in the near future. Goodbye.